So we're glad that you could join us on this Friday evening tour of the exhibition with Curator Maymanah Farhat. She is the curator of the exhibit currently in our gallery titled Poetry is Not a Luxury. This show was originally organized by the Center for Book Arts in New York, and we are extremely grateful to them for all of their hard work and organization in getting the exhibit here to the West Coast so that we could share it with you. One thing that I want to talk about before I introduce Maymanah to you guys, we will be having an additional event in November, on November 12th. Maymanah will be leading that presentation, and that presentation will be about the artist and illustrator Mine Ukubo. So we will have information on our website about that very, very soon. So a little bit about Maymanah. She's an independent curator and art historian focusing on underrepresented artists and forgotten art scenes. She's written for various magazines, including Apollo, Canvas, and Art and Auction. In 2019, she curated the exhibition that's currently in our gallery space, titled Poetry is Not a Luxury, and co-curated an exhibition titled History is Not Here, Art and the Arab Imaginary at the Minnesota Museum of American Art in St. Paul. It's been my pleasure to work with and learn from Maymanah over the course of this exhibition. And I'm excited to be here this evening with Maymanah as she tours you through the exhibition Poetry is Not a Luxury and discusses some of the work in depth. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead. I'll hand it over to Maymanah and go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is Friday night, and but in pandemic time, I guess we just hang out at home and, learn some things. So this is what I hope that I can share some things about the exhibition with you in lieu of you going to see it. Hopefully, if you're in the Bay Area and you're interested, you can schedule an appointment with Jenny and see it in person, because it's a pretty expansive show in the sense that there are a lot of objects and a number of detailed descriptions of works, and you really just have to experience it in person. So I hope you get that chance. I wanted to talk tonight about some of the ideas behind the show, and then I will discuss some of the works in detail. The show originated, as Jenny mentioned, at the Center for Book Arts in Manhattan, and the idea behind it was the concept of book arts as something very personal, but then something very powerful at the same time. And so looking at Audre Lorde's work specifically, someone who really personified and advocated that the personal is political, along with her peers of the time, other feminist writers and thinkers of the 70s and 80s. This idea that artist books could then be used as something very, very political and a form of activism by artists that approach it through subjective lens. The idea, again, that the personal is political, and that artist books are a very kind of intimate sort of media, and they allow for that sort of thing. And definitely in terms of the viewer or whoever is handling the art object, there is that sense of immediacy and that intimacy that takes place. So I wanted to just talk about some of the works. Cheryl, I will ask you to zoom in on some of the specific works. And if we can start with Martha Rosler's Service, a trilogy on colonization. In putting together the show, I wanted to have a broad selection of book arts and from different artists. And most of the artists in the exhibition are women. And I wanted to start with Rosler in this presentation because, of course, her links to feminist art and just the sense of really strong sense of advocacy and political commitment that she has demonstrated throughout her artistic career. And this piece in particular was really interesting to me in the sense that It's actually a collection of 3 separate male art projects that she did that are related. And she referred to them as novels. So the first one is A Budding Gourmet, which focuses on the story of a housewife who is intent on learning international recipes and honing her cooking skills. The second one is called McTower's Maid, which is a fast line cook, the story of a fast line cook. And the third is called Tijuana Maid, which is in Spanish. And so part of the idea behind the project was that she would create these postcards and send them one by one. And she would have a certain amount of time in between when she would send the next part of the trilogy. And for Rosler, it was really about the intimacy of mail, and the idea is that the stories would brew after a long period of time, from one to the next. And I really love this piece in the sense that it encapsulates her work at the time, which is, if we think about the semiotics of the kitchen, her famous video work, and the way that she's dealing with ideas of femininity and domesticity and what that means in larger sort of context. The Tijuana Maid story in particular is really interesting to me because she's dealing with race, she's dealing with gender, she's dealing with class. The story is of a woman who comes over from Tijuana to work in the kitchen of a wealthy white woman, and the kind of power dynamics that play out in that relationship between what she refers to as a mistress and servant. If we jump from Martha Rosler's work to Janine Biuno, I wanted to make a link between these works in the sense that they're both dealing with signs. And for Janine in particular, her work focuses on the semiotics of the built environment. So I thought that was a perfect way to kind of connect to Rosler's work, even though they're vastly different. I mean, Martha Rosler's work is dealing with these interior kind of domestic spaces, and Janine's work is dealing with the built environment or the urban environment. And what I loved about the cutouts, which you see on the wall, which are called construction wall void studies, and the zine there that's displayed, which is called Post No Bills, is that the inspiration for it, or I should say the reference to it for these works, are the little windows that they normally cut out on construction walls. I don't know if they have them in California, but in New York, you'll have these green kind of construction walls that go around the construction site. They're kind of like these last minute makeshift things. And then legally you have to be able to look into the site as a passerby, or, the public should be able to see. And I'm assuming as well, the people that come by and make sure that all the safety regulations are in place. So for Janine, I mean, seeing these and peering into them, I think find it very fascinating that she's toying with the idea of the fact that we take these kinds of things for granted, in the sense that these are very distinct sort of shapes and distinct sort of views, really, that are shaping how we navigate a city, particularly in a place like New York or San Francisco, where there's so much development and gentrification, and how does that inform sort of our understanding of space and create new psychic spaces, really. So again, if we see these shapes, which are pretty uniform in the sense that they're always triangular, or or it's a square, what do these shapes mean? How can we read them as signs? And tying that back to the larger sort of theoretical underpinnings of the show, not just with Audre Lorde's concept of poetry not being a luxury, but rather a necessity, particularly for women. I also was looking at a writer named Chela Sandoval, who builds on Audre Lorde's ideas and the work of other writers like Gloria Anzaldúa, whose work on borderlands and hybrid cultures was really instrumental to feminist thinking at the time as well. And Chela Sandoval says, reminds us in her book, Methodology of the Oppressed, which I cite in my catalog essay, that reading signs is a way of determining the power relations. And so I think that in Janine's work in particular, that's something that's very evident. This idea that we can walk down the street and our city is changing before us, and there are these signs, these views, so to speak, that we encounter that definitely reflect a new kind of shift in power relations in terms of how we navigate the city. And then also jumping from Janine's work to Sable Elise Smith's work, Landscapes and Playgrounds. There's another great connection that can be made in the sense that those construction windows, we might call them, they allow you to look into another kind of space, right? The site under construction. And we might even say that they're a site of fantasy because, this is something new that's brought into the environment and that will be built up, and the ideas of real estate developers and gentrification and how that's going to change the landscape. And in Sable Lee Smith's work, she's looking at the prison specifically as a site of fantasy, and the landscapes around the prison also being a site of fantasy, but then also the emotional landscapes of being incarcerated or visiting someone who's incarcerated. So this piece is particularly poignant in the sense that it's a very personal kind of exploration of what that means. Sable's father is incarcerated, and in it she has both sort of diary entries in which she reflects on visiting him in prison. And she also includes letters from her father writing her from prison. There are a few photographs. And one of the things that she really kind of zeroes in on in terms of the emotional landscapes that are created in this environment are the waiting rooms for families, which she was really struck by in the sense that when she first went, she noticed that there were these murals on the walls of the waiting rooms, these landscape murals. So again, the idea of fantasy. And the insert that Jenny's showing now is part of a reproduction from a coloring book that's also offered to the children of the incarcerated when they go and visit. And the story in the coloring book is supposed to kind of explain to the child, the situation in which they find themselves in terms of the environment that they're going to enter and things like that. And Sable actually has a great artist talk that was part of the Aperture Foundation's conversations. You can find it on YouTube, in which she talks about this work and the subsequent series of large scale sort of drawings that are based on these coloring books. So again, the idea that there's a connection between Janine's work and Sable's work in terms of how we navigate space, the kind of psychic spaces that are created, and definitely with regard to what Chela Sandoval calls the reading of signs and the power dynamics that are created. Including this particular piece by Sable also connects to a work that's really, really important to me in terms of the building of this exhibition. When I was first invited to curate this show from the Center of Book Arts in Manhattan, I really wanted to look at the work of Mine Okubo, who, as Jenny mentioned, I'll be presenting on her work next month. But the specific work that I was interested in from the beginning was her graphic novel. Well, it's kind of a graphic memoir, actually, sorry. Citizen 13660, which is a book that she created in the early 40s, right after being released from Topaz concentration camp under Japanese internment. And so in the show, we have a first edition copy of the book, in addition to a number of other things that, like a book announcement, her catalog from the 1970s of her retrospective at the Oakland Museum. Mine was born and raised in Riverside, but attended UC Berkeley for both her BFA and MFA, and worked in the Bay Area during the WPA period. She actually was one of the tour guides for Diego Rivera's mural that he painted on Treasure Island, and was very active herself. She did a mosaic in one of the Army hospitals in Oakland, and in a couple of other places as well, and she was painting. She was very active. And she got a fellowship and was able to travel around Europe, and then World War II broke out. So she returned home, and then shortly after got the detention orders that she had to report to the racetrack in San Bruno there. And so the book is a selection from those 2,000 drawings that she made while at Topaz concentration camp. So again, I really appreciated the fact that it was such a personal sort of story that she was telling, but yet the implications of it, and there was a larger reference to this issue that was taking place in terms of the Japanese internment and the uprooting of a people and xenophobia and all these sort of things that took place during that time. And the way that we can kind of relate it back to Sable's work as well, in the sense that in both instances, in Landscapes and Playgrounds and in Citizen 13660, there's a sense of really strong sense of grief that one sees in the visuals of both books. Whether it's in the line drawings of Mine Okubo, or the diary entries of Sables, or the photographs, or even the coloring book that she appropriates and reproduces in her work. Thank you, Jenny. One of the running themes in the exhibition is this sense of place and what that means. And if we can go over to Christine Wong Yap's work, which is, there it is. For this leg of the exhibition is actually touring for the next couple of years. And for this stop, I wanted to add another work by Christine, specifically because it relates to the Bay Area. If you notice, if you were able to see the roster of artists online, there are a number of artists from the Bay Area. There's Patricia Tavernier, there's Mine, there's Christine Wong Yap, who is originally from the Bay Area but lives in New York now, but shuttles back and forth and has done several projects. She has a current project actually in Chinatown that's up, that she recently launched. And this one she did while in residence actually at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. And she invited a number of, it was sort of an open call that she had for community members to submit their stories of belonging. So whether it be in terms of the neighborhood, a certain place, it could be a shop, it could be a library, I mean, any sort of place where they feel that they belong. It could be the larger region. In some instances, people described a sense of belonging that they carry with them. So this internal sort of sense of belonging. And for that, Christine made the printed bandanas that we see above. She made 6 total based on specific stories where contributors kind of relayed that to her. So that one says, belonging made me stronger. I will fight to belong, for all my people to belong. And for the other stories, she compiled them in the book that Jenny was just showing you. And she created 25 hand-lettered certificates of belonging. And then those certificates were actually placed in the specific site where the contributor had said that, you know, they feel like they belong. So in putting together the exhibition, one of the things that I wanted to emphasize was not only how book arts become a form of advocacy, or a form of activism, I should say, but also the way in which the production of book arts in general are supported. So with the Center for Book Arts, when they invited me to organize the exhibition, I drew from the permanent collection there. And a number of the works were actually created while artists were in residence there. So Christine's other piece that's included in the exhibition was created while in residence, working together. Jenny, do you mind opening that book? Yeah, thank you. There's a nice parallel here with Sable Lee Smith's book, in the sense that, you know, this is based on those children's books where you can change, you know, the different parts of the figure. And in Christine's book specifically, what ends up happening when you change and move the parts is that the situation that is, or the scene, the scenarios changes as well. So the book is about antagonisms, but then also collaborations and solidarity and things like that. The idea of working together. So when selecting the work for the show, I worked very closely with Theo Roth, the archivist at the Center for Book Arts in Manhattan, and shared my initial ideas behind the show. And then he went and pulled a number of the works from storage and shared them with me. And we had really lovely conversations in terms of how we thought that they would fit with the theme of the show, and kind of expand on some of the ideas that I had initially proposed. So Theo was very instrumental in selecting the work as well. And if we can just go to Joyce's work now. This is kind of the centerpiece of the show in the sense that it's the largest work, and it's a multimedia work. There are 2 artist books that are displayed on the table, and then the large centerpiece, which is the rug. The rug is actually kind of collaged, or I look at it more as like an inlaid piece using kitchen linoleum. You can see the tiles. That's sort of like faux marble or granite and the faux wood. And other parts of it actually are based on traditional rugs, we might say Persian rugs, but then also on certain religious scriptures. And Joyce is actually, her background is very interesting. She's Iraqi, and her parents are from Baghdad, and their background, they're Iraqi Jews, And her father and mother immigrated to the US while her father was a PhD student in the Midwest. And it was shortly after her uncle, who was activist as a leader of the Communist Party, a youth leader of the Communist Party in Baghdad, was executed along with other young men who were very active Marxists in Iraq. They were executed by the king in the 40s. So the books that Joyce produced for this work to accompany this rug are kind of two parts from her own personal history. The first is about her uncle, and then the second is about the 1991 American invasion of Iraq and the war, and the ways in which her father, who refused to speak Arabic up until that point, began to speak Arabic after witnessing the bombings from afar via television and news broadcast and things like that. So in these two books, Joyce reflects on this complex personal history, this familial history that she has, and the ways in which memory and sense of place as well, really came back to her parents, her father in particular, who would see, places that the U.S. was bombing in Baghdad, and he would say, oh, so-and-so had a shop here, or this is where we used to buy books, or, those kinds of things. There's one page in particular in this book that I find to be really striking. It's an image of Joyce at the time, and over it is a reference to a conversation that she had with her father. There it is. And it says, he sees an Iraqi mother on television fleeing with her children to Syria and tells me she looks just like you. Other pages of the book include Joyce's own annotations about Baghdad, and again, this idea of mapping. In putting together the show, I really wanted to explore how book arts have been used by a variety of artists, both artists who identify as book artists and artists working in installation, some artists working in video. What about the media of book arts in general really makes artists gravitate towards them for specific projects? So the idea of Joyce turning to book arts for this particular installation, Martha Rosler working in mail art, Janine producing the zine, Christine creating the book or even the bandanas. I found it fascinating that with this particular kind of work, where subjectivity or the personal is very political, book arts tends to be the realm in which artists really sort of explore these things and really feel free and really find the means, I should say, to communicate these subjective experiences with the intent of referring to larger sort of socio-political issues. And then also the idea of book arts and artist books and zines, mail art, and how, again, that intimacy, that sense that we can hold it in our hands. It can be easily produced, although these are not simple art objects by any means, but in the sense that it can be mass produced if one wants, or there can just be only one singular object. I was interested in a number of these sort of issues, so these formal and conceptual and theoretical too as well, in terms of like I was mentioning Chela Sandoval and the reading of signs, power dynamics and things like that. I just want to read one quick excerpt from Audre Lorde's essay, Poetry is Not a Luxury, to give you a better idea of where the idea for the show started. So she says, in the essay called Poetry is Not a Luxury, she says, for women, then, poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence. It forms the quality of light within which we predicate our hopes and dreams towards survival and change, first made into language, then into idea, then into more tangible action. And so for me, in relating this back to book arts, I really felt that book arts encompass all of those things. First made into language, whether it's a visual language and a series of signs, or the recording of diary entries, or even a graphic memoir, then into idea, then into more tangible action. And for me, that really speaks to the power of art, in the sense that art can be and does become tangible action. And I think that wraps it up.
So let's see. So Maymanah, I've actually asked people if they have questions for you. Now would be a great time to go ahead and type those questions into the chat. We have a little bit of time for questions. And thank you so much for talking about the work that we've seen this evening, and then also sharing additional stories from the artists with us. So if you have questions, please go ahead, type those in. That would be great. I have a fast question for you. Are you currently working on any projects, any curatorial projects of your own?
Yes.
That you would like to talk about?
Well, I'm forever researching Mineo Kubo's work. I've been researching her work for the past 3 years, and was fortunate enough to assist with the placing of 2 of her pre-war, post-war works from the 40s in 2 museums, the Crocker Art Museum and the Phoenix Art Museum. So that was my own personal accomplishment that I feel very proud of, because I love her work, and I feel like there's so much content there. And so I've been mining archives and trying to gather as much research as possible. I've been buying archival materials from regional auctions whenever I can, whenever I get those auction alerts for Mina's work. It's become my own personal obsession. So I hope to really flesh out those ideas on her work, because it's, once she was released from internment and her book came out, the reception to it in the 1940s was surprisingly really supportive. And in terms of reviewers and audience and sales of the book itself, which is kind of surprising, because internment was just kind of something that really wasn't fought against as strongly as one would think. And so for the people to be receptive to the book and support her is really phenomenal. But I'm interested in her work and her life before internment, which has kind of been buried a bit. There's a massive archive of hers at Riverside City College that has a lot of that material that I hope to get to soon. But I hope one day to really put those ideas into a form of an exhibition, a large retrospective, which is part of the reason why I included the catalog from the Oakland Museum, because that's definitely a template. And she worked closely with them on that show. She was still alive at that point. And in the end, she ended up donating all the works from the exhibition to the Oakland Museum. So I'm
excited about your presentation next month.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's going to be great. We have a question here. Is there anyone whose work you wish you could have included in the current exhibition that you weren't able to include in the current exhibition?
Yeah, so many people. So many people. I wasn't very familiar with book arts before I was invited to curate the show. So a lot of research went into it. I wanted to get it right. And I was able to come across a number of book artists whose work I really, really find interesting, particularly in the permanent collection of the Center for Book Arts. It's a really exciting field. In the sense that there's so much material there and so many artists. I mean, you have you have artists who kind of dabble in it, and then artists who are actually book artists, and printmakers and mail artists and things like that. I wish we could have had a larger selection of Patricia Tavernier's work, particularly for the San Francisco leg of the show, because she's a Bay Area artist, very active in the feminist art movement in the Bay Area in the 70s. And really influential as well. But it's really the basic premise for the show can be expanded, and more artists can be included at a later time. It's really sort of a fluid template for the show.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I mean, there are many enjoyable and fascinating things about the exhibit, but I love the fact that, you were able to pull artists local to the area and include them in the exhibit as well. And that can be retooled depending on where the exhibit is traveling.
Yeah, so. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that speaks less to curatorial vision, I think, and more to feminist theory, particularly third world feminism and Audre Lorde's ideas, the concept of intersectionality that originated with Barbara Smith and even later with Chela Sandoval and Methodology of the Oppressed. I mean, they really give you the framework for that, and for those intersections and for those parallels and for that sort of expansive sort of framework.
Let's see. Colleen says, what a profound exhibition, from the children's coloring pages and the deep blue loss interned. All these ideas traveling the world in women's hands, which is a really beautiful sentence.
That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Maymanah's presentation is fantastic. And then Colleen says, next month in Oakland, how do we go? Next, I think maybe that might be a reference to the Mine Ukubo exhibit that was in Oakland, but that exhibit was in the 70s?
It was in the 70s, yeah. But there's a gorgeous, gorgeous portrait of her mother and a cat that should be on display still. It was in the California galleries. That they have there. It's so beautiful. And that's from before internment as well. But in the exhibition there at the San Francisco Center for the Book, we have an original copy of the 1943 issue of Fortune magazine that she illustrated. And actually she was released from internment because Fortune magazine advocated for her and actually petitioned the US government to release her on a special assignment for the magazine. And Fortune magazine brought her to New York City and set her up with an apartment that she lived in until she died in the early 2000s in Greenwich Village. And from there, she worked on her book and then began as an illustrator. I could go on. This is like,
You will.
I will. In November, yes. You can see how much I love her.
I know. So there's a great question. How does George Takei's They Called Us Enemy compare to Citizen 13660?
I haven't read that. My daughter has, actually. My preteen has read both books, and she really loved that book as well. I should actually go and read it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have it. So I'm not sure. But the thing to remember about Mine's book is that she was doing the drawings while interned. And so she was known for always carrying a sketch pad with her. So she, in a lot of the drawings, she represents herself, but usually to the corner, in the corner to the side as like someone who's narrating the scene, but then also standing as an observer as well. So I'm not sure how George Takei's book is, but hers is very, very specific. There are a number of aesthetic devices that she uses as a narrator and as an illustrator.
I think, are there any last minute questions for Maymanah? Yes, no, maybe. This is the point where I wish I could hear people's like fingers furiously tapping on the keyboards, but I kind of have to do that thing where it's like, oh, okay. All right. Well, I guess if there are no further questions, what we will do is I will say thank you so much, Maymanah, for giving us this tour this evening.